Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of Misfortune of Song by Christy Nicholas, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me for chapter 1. I cannot do what you ask, my chief. Maelan kept his back stiff and his gaze forward. He couldn't bring himself to look Dermot and Brian in the eye, not after the command he'd just been given. Not only did it leave a bitter taste in Maelan's mouth, but such an act would break his code of honor as a Christian. The chieftain stopped mid-stride. What did you say, Maelan? Concentrating on the wall tapestry in the large royal chamber, Maelan remained still. I said, I cannot kill Murtaugh Brian. Dermot growled and spun, his thin frame hidden by the enormous multicolored cloak he loved wearing. His face darkened and he picked up a metal platter. The remains of his meal dropped to the floor as he flung the platter against the wooden walls. The harsh clang made Maelan flinch, and he didn't flinch easily. He stepped so close to Maelan, their noses almost touched. The smell of meat and onions came strong from the other man's breath. How many winters have you been a warrior, Maelan? Almost 50, my chief. Dermot cocked his head and raised his eyebrows. In 50 winters' time, you've never killed anyone? He gritted his teeth. Of course, a warrior kills many enemies, my chief. Yet you refuse to kill my enemy now? You haven't ordered me to kill an enemy. Instead, you've ordered me to kill your own sick brother. You do not order an honorable killing. You order a kin assassination, my chief. Dermot threw his hands in the air. Stop saying, my chief, every other word, Maelan. By the power of the sun and the moon, we've known each other too long for such formalities. I don't understand your reluctance. The man is a warrior, just as you are. Why would you scruple to kill another warrior? Killing a warrior in a battle is honorable. Killing a helpless kinsman on his sickbed is murder. He spun, pacing several times as he spoke. You and your stupid Christian morals. Why are you so blind to necessity, Maelan? When he recovers, he'll take the toit from me again. If that happens, you'll be just as disposed as I will be. Maelan could think of nothing to say. Either he argued with Dermot or betrayed his beliefs. No man could serve two masters. Chief Dermot closed his eyes and let out a weary sigh. Time was, you would do as your chief commanded, Maelan. When did you change? Maelan knew when he'd changed. He clenched his teeth against the memory of the battle, a day which still haunted him. Dermot crossed his arms and frowned. Sometimes I just don't understand you, Maelan. You're my war chief, my best warrior, and one of my oldest friends. You've stood by me through war, raids, and celebrations. Your wife, may she rest in the Summerlands, was my own dear cousin. That is all true, my chief. Nothing changed. Yet you won't kill for me. Maelan straightened his spine. I cannot justify such an act to my God. It is dishonorable. Dermot threw up his hands. Dishonorable? How in the name of all things holy is killing dishonorable? Battle is an ancient tradition for all the Gaels. This is not a battle, and not for Christians, my chief. I mean Dermot. Dermot growled. Codswallop, a bunch of stammering weaklings. You and my brother both love them for some unknown reason. Go, Maelan, leave me now. Do send me someone with the skills I need. You must have one warrior in your command unweakened by your Christian morals. Maelan almost smiled, but restrained himself. Yes, Dermot. Once he safely escaped the royal rooms, he breathed a sigh of relief. It really didn't matter who he sent in his stead. No one else would have his own advantage. Murtaugh Brian, his own chief's brother and rival for the chiefdom of Maelan, would live another day unless his illness took him. Maelan had a good group of warriors under him with various skills and specialties. Maelan could be an excellent assassin thanks to his magical talent, but he'd never used his magic for something against his code. As Dermot had pointed out, not every Gaelic warrior believed secret killing to be dishonorable. In Gaelic culture, killing was a logical part of the constant warfare between tribes and clans. However, Maelan was raised in a strict Christian household. His grandfather had been a priest, and such sins were unforgivable. His chief still cleaved into his pagan beliefs, and though Dermot certainly gave lip service to the Christian God and their priest when it suited him, he could hardly do less these days with the amount of sheer power the church now held. Many winters ago, in Maelan's great-grandfather's time, pagans lived everywhere, but they'd been hunted and destroyed with alarming violence in other lands. Crucifixions, even burnings, were not unheard of. This practice wasn't as common in their own lands. Despite being a warrior all his life, Maelan detested and regretted unnecessary violence. A shred of memory intruded on him, a time when violence ruled his heart, but he shoved it away. Maelan found the sanctuary of his own room and closed the door, thankful to be out of sight. He removed the simple brat from around his shoulders and sat at the plain wooden desk. He had work to do. The supply lists were still unfinished, and he must assign mentors to the new trainees. Some of those boys were barely grown. One only counted 7 winters. Certainly training a warrior young helped get them used to the feel of a spear in their hands. But 7? Maelan's own training had officially started at 12, but he'd played with a wooden sword since he was 10. That's when he was fostered to his mother's brother, a warrior in crime. He had been so proud of his wooden practice sword and leather helm. Maelan smiled at the memory, but frowned at the memory of his grandmother. She'd left the winter before his fostering, disappearing into the night without a word. He'd only found her once, many winters later. He clenched his teeth against his frustration at that meeting. When he had turned 30, she sought him out again, though he believed her long dead. She'd gifted him with a family heirloom, passed down for generations untold. He kept the brooch, a magical artifact which granted him the ability to stay hidden in plain sight. Her talent hadn't been so useful. Instead, hers almost got her killed. Did she still live somewhere? Had she managed to reinvent her life again? He hoped so. He suspected, however, after she relinquished the brooch, her talent of eternal youth had faded. After swallowing hard and chiding himself for useless nostalgia, Maelan bent to his work. The savory odor of roast beef met Maelan at the doorway of the feast hall. He stopped to take an appreciative breath of his favorite meal. The cook at Synopsis had perfected the art of slow roasting spit beef, marinating the meat with some sort of miraculous herbs. He didn't care if he went to the devil for eating it. The beef tasted so good. He took his place about a third of the way down the long wooden table. The head of the table was reserved for the chief, his family, and his closest advisors. Then came Maelan as war chief, and Eogan Macfleon as his second and closest friend. The rest of the soldiers, wives, and other craftsmen were arrayed at the other end. In all, 30 people sat at the chief's table. Raucous laughter from the lower end of the table made him narrow his gaze. If they got too rowdy, Maelan had a duty to discipline them. The noise settled when one of the younger warriors noticed his glare. He shushed his companions, and they continued in a more subdued volume. A murmur rippled through the hall as 2 young women entered, chatting merrily between themselves. His granddaughter, Orlagh, and her best friend, Maelan. His granddaughter, all of 17 winters, was his pride and joy. She was a strong young lady with long blonde straight hair and freckles. He did wish she acted more biddable, but she had a proper warrior spirit beneath her short stature. He was proud of her despite her constant japes, but Orlagh wasn't the one who had caused the murmurs. Yolande had white hair, not white like a very pale blonde, but white as new fallen snow. She had violet eyes and other worldly colorings, She had violet eyes, and her otherworldly colorings always caused rumors of fey blood. Maelan decided the rumors were a load of rubbish. He'd known a girl with violet eyes when he was a lad, and she was certainly human. Didn't most elders get white hair? Nothing unnatural about that. But speculation never seemed to settle, no matter how many winters Yolande lived at Synopsis. Of course, the fact she kept a raven with white eyes as a pet did nothing to quell such rumors. Their giggles were light and twinkling compared to the warriors' rough laughter. The room hushed as they took their seats, but they weren't the cause for the silence. The chief entered and stood at the head of the table, surveying his extended family and retainers. He nodded to the servants, and they bustled in with huge platters. They placed the first platter in front of Chief Dermot, a whole roasted haunch of beef, still sizzling from the spitfire. As they sliced into the roast, its aroma permeated the hall, and Maelan had to restrain himself from grabbing his portion out of turn. As no guests were present, Chief Dermot received the choicest portion, the tenderloin, a beautifully marbled cut near the ribs. Maelan's mouth watered as he waited. More servants brought root vegetables, barley bread, cheese, and ale. Those at the head of the table got wine or mead, as they preferred. Soon conversation faded as people ate, chattering voices replaced by the smacking of lips and the glugging of drink. After satisfying his hunger on the rare roast beef, Maelan turned to his right. Eogan, did you get the younglings set up with their training schedule today? Around a mouthful of cheese, Eogan mumbled an affirmative. He then swigged half his ale and grinned. Aye, and a couple of good lads we have too. 2 are already taking charge of the rest. The ginger one, though, watch out for him. He's already caught the girl's attention. What about the wee one? Sean Oak's boy. Eogan waved his hand. Ah, he's fine. That one carries a fierce anger. You should have seen him attacking the Pell. Have you seen the size of his feet? He'll outgrow them all. Reassured by his second's assessment of the new fosterlings, Maelan nodded. Inform me if any problems crop up tomorrow. The first day is always full of eager anticipation, but then reality sets in. Many realize they won't see their parents for many moons, so the power plays and bullying begin. Eogan narrowed his gaze and pointed to Maelan with a chunk of bread. Have I ever let you down, Maelan? In training, boys? Never. However, I do recall a couple of situations I've had to extract you from. Laughing, Eogan dipped the bread into the beef drippings on his plate. True enough, but it was grand fun, Remember my fat, feisty woman down in Lithmanek, the one with the midnight dark braids? Oh, she was so worth it. Despite himself, Maelan chuckled. Eogan had wooed the woman for moons. She'd been at least a foot taller than the stocky warrior and several stones heavier. When he finally succeeded in bedding her, they'd practically destroyed the tavern room. Maelan had to pay for damage to the chairs, tables, and even a cracked hearthstone. What in God's name had they done to crack a hearthstone? Maelan never asked and always wondered. Eogan had been in no shape to answer questions at the time. Covered in cuts and bruises, passed out from his exertions, Maelan had to drag him home to Sien Cora via boat along the river Shian. Eogan plunked a full mug of small ale in front of him. Maelan, you're thinking too hard. Drink more, think less. Maelan sighed and gazed into the frothy mug. Eogan's answer to most things was drinking. Maelan didn't share his friend's gleeful faith everything would work out by getting drunk. With a slap on his back, Eogan growled, I said drink. The ale won't get any stronger if you stare at it. It might curdle from your sour visage, but the ale won't get any stronger. Maelan shoved Eogan with his shoulder and growled back. The shorter man was his closest friend, but he knew better than to be so familiar in front of others. Maelan was a war chief, had a dignity to maintain and an image to uphold. Tumbling about in a drunken brawl was not part of his image, no matter Eogan's affinity for such a state. Sometimes Maelan believed Eogan would have been better off in a fienne, free from command of any chief, marauding across the countryside and hiring himself out as a mercenary. While some warriors who ran with the fienne were landless and poor, all Tuel warriors owned land. It was necessary to support them so they might devote themselves to fighting, to protecting the chief and the laborers. While Tuel warriors had a code, some acted more nobly than others. Eogan didn't come from peasant stock, but he acted as if he did. Sometimes Maelan wondered if it was worth all he went through to protect Eogan from his own follies. Then he remembered the Ailic, and all the disloyal thoughts fled. He needed to escape. After chugging the mug of ale, he pushed himself away from the table. His wooden bench made no noise in the din of conversation, and he escaped from the smoke-filled hall.